So let's discuss children with communication disorders and how to go about meeting their needs in the education system. It's important to know some key terms and definitions. So communication is the exchange of ideas, information, thoughts, and feelings. So communication can look different ways. It's more than just what you speak. It's your facial expressions, your body language, which includes body position, the tension that sometimes people carry in their bodies. I tend to hold my shoulders up really high. It's something I did not realize until someone pointed out to me. But not only do I tend to kind of draw my shoulders in, I also tend to hold my breath. So it's the different body language signals that you can give off. Sometimes you need to have that information given to you. But now that I'm aware of it, I am definitely more conscious of it, and I try my best to not do that. But now I'm more aware that I now do things like ring my fingers, or I have a particular spot on my wrist that I rub a lot. Just different things. But communication can include facial expressions, your natural gestures, and then of course language, vocalizations. Sometimes as parents we'll change our tone to let our kids or even our students know that we mean business. So these are all different types of communication. Language, however, is the verbal system that we use, and it's bound to certain rules, of course. So, whether it be written language where we're writing out things and there's certain language that goes along with grammar, or it could just be, it's very natural in America, at least, to say please and thank you, or at least it used to be. Whereas in other cultures, it may not necessarily be seen as a thing that needs to be done. There are 5 different areas that make up language, and it goes through them here: semantics, pragmatics, phonology, how you pronounce things, morphology, and the syntax. As well as you have speech. So of course, speech is very self-explanatory. This is how you orally produce your words. And as I've talked about my son in the past, I shared that he has delayed speech disorder, and his muscles are delayed in the movement from the signals they get from the brain, or vice versa. Maybe the signals leaving the brain are delayed. Regardless, these 6 components here that are needed to produce words effectively, he has a delay in muscle tone, as well as in his ability to be able to control these things. So as a result, like my son, his speech doesn't come out 100% correct. And for other students who have delayed speech disorders, there could be parts that are here that are also delayed. So as a result, it's going to result in a different type of language, or and when I say language, meaning the way they produce it is going to sound different than the way that it was written. The IDEA definition of speech or language impairment basically is a disorder, stuttering, impaired articulation, language impairment, or a voice impairment that affects a child's educational performance. And there are different things that are put in place in addition to speech therapy that can help children be able to communicate their needs in the classroom setting. Disruptions to the communication process can affect language, speech, or hearing. If you've ever encountered anyone who has had a hearing impairment, they sometimes may have more of a nasally sounding voice, and we need our sense of hearing to be able to understand what's being said to us. And some of you might be saying, yeah, well, duh. But it also plays the role of helping you learn how to produce sound, how to produce certain words, how to make sound, how to make words, there it is, how to make words sound the way they're supposed to sound. So if a person has a hearing impairment, he or she is not going to be able to, will not hear, maybe the full word Mississippi. Maybe the S is a hard sound for them to pronounce as well as to understand. So they're not going to be able to say the word Mississippi, as clearly as you and I. Language disorders are similar to speech disorders, but it delays in the understanding of others. So speech is when there's a delay in your production of sound and in your voice, and then the language disorder is a delay in your understanding. So me sitting here telling you how to drive from San Diego State to PLNU main campus, you know, you may hear 8, you may hear, you know, I don't know, Nimitz Boulevard. But if you don't hear the full pronunciation of Nimitz, you may end up continuing straight and end up in OB and end up on another street that begins with an N, simply because if a person has a language disorder, they may not hear the full syllables as well as in all the letters that are being pronounced in the word. And thus it will, you know, proceed to give them wrong directions, delay them from getting to school. So you can think of how a student is taking a test, and maybe if it's an oral test and you're saying, you know, spell the word Nimitz, they may not hear all the letters, therefore getting it wrong, therefore it affecting their grade on the quiz. Speech disorders are any type of disorder that affects phonology, phonological or phonology, fluency, and then voice impairments. So when it comes to communication disorders, they basically fall under 2 headers. You got speech disorders and language disorders. Speech disorders, like I've said before, you can kind of tell because they're not going to be pronouncing the words as clearly as someone who doesn't have a speech disorder. But with the language disorder, sometimes it may show up in expressive, and that's how they write, how they speak. And so basically that's what they're saying, the information they're giving out. That's your expression. That falls under expressive. And then sometimes it could be a receptive language disorder. So it's possible to be able to articulate what you have to say correctly, but then when it comes to your receptive language, and that's what you're receiving, what you're hearing, what you're understanding, then you may see the delay. And in cases like this, it would be helpful to give students oral exams, because if you're asking, you know, Johnny to, you know, explain their summer vacation, you know, he or she may not be able to articulate that well in writing, but they may be able to give it back to you because they're able to just express themselves. And so the flip side of that would be the receptive. If you gave it to them in, like, say, for instance, a prompt for an essay question, you know, after they've read it, they may be like, well, okay, summer vacation. I'm not really sure. What do you mean? And then their answer, which would be their essay, may not target exactly what you were looking for. So these are different things to look for when you may suspect that your, you know, a student or your child has something going on and you're not sure if it's what they're understanding or what they're able to articulate. So that's the two ways to go about looking at that, or just being aware that there are 2 different types. So there's 3 levels of language intervention strategies. Level 1 is basically having the child speak, giving them opportunities to be in situations where they have to speak up for themselves. We used to do this with our son a lot when we would go out to restaurants, especially places that had a lot of pictures on their menus, Denny's, Chili's, places like that. And basically we would put Caleb in a situation where he would have to at least point to what he wants, or if it was something that he could say, we would just say, use your words. And so that was his opportunity to practice, you know, self-advocacy. It's an opportunity to work on his speech and to build up, hopefully build up his confidence to be able to speak more for himself, not only just in a public setting, but also to strangers, just in case if he ever needs to. So, you know, the more practice, the better, which is something that goes across the board for all individuals, all children, regardless of ability level. And in some cases, it could be necessary to have the child engage in maybe one-on-one, like therapy, or working with the guidance counselor, so that he or she can work on the student's reading abilities and just the understanding of words in itself. Sometimes students in this situation will step out and have to, well, they'll call it pull out. I'm not really sure what they call it now, but once upon a time they would call it pull out, and the student would go to the special education classroom, and that's where they would get, you know, their needs met. In most cases, the children who are doing pull out, usually have a 504, because the IEP would pretty much necessitate that the students spend a guaranteed amount of time in the special education classroom. But this level 2 can be done in a variety of settings. Like I said, sometimes it's just going to see the reading specialist or going to the guidance counselor. It's just working on the child, building up their vocabulary so that hopefully the child is able to engage in the classroom with their peers. Let's see. And so then the last intervention is always going to be disability specific. So if they are completely deaf and they're learning sign language, then this is where, they would probably spend time solely in the special education classroom. They're also probably going to be receiving some of these services through the state if they are a client of a state service. Finger spelling has been effective in helping children communicate. And it's been, nowadays you can do finger spelling with a number of things, from getting the sand, the play sand and drawing letters that way. I've seen students take a Ziploc bag and fill it with, I want to say, water with a little bit of oil and food coloring. And, not too big, but just enough so that you can, when you press your finger down, like the words or the letters will stay, and they'll practice it that way. Not parents. Teachers will also, if they want to kind of do double duty, they will say, hey, we're going to clean the desk, but we're also going to practice spelling. So they'll put down shaving cream on the desk. And so then, they'll spread it out, and then they'll say, we'll practice writing our name. And so the kids are getting into it because they're able to make a mess and it's fun. And the good thing about shaving cream is it cleans the tabletops. So when it's done, you've done practicing letters, numbers, shapes, whatever it is. It's like, okay, everybody, here's your paper towel, wipe everything clean. And then you've gotten like free work out of your students because now they've cleaned the desk. Sometimes concept development is necessary, and then similar to things that you would do with children with different types of disabilities, you're just focusing on that one concept and hopefully getting the child to make learning gains in that area. And then augmentative communication skills, communication technologies. This could be anything from hearing aids, hearing assistant devices. And these would be the ones that just make things bigger, make the sound larger. Sometimes the students will have the teacher wear a microphone that has a transmitter on it, and then the student may have like an AirPod or their own headphones into their ear, so that way whatever the professor's saying, regardless to where the professor is in the classroom, the student can hear him or her. Lastly, when it comes to communication disorders, every school has an assigned SLP, and that's the speech and language pathologist. This is someone who has gone to school, gotten their bachelor's. You do have to go and get your master's in this, and I believe there's a certification. I'm pretty sure there is a certification exam that goes along with this, but SLPs are always in need. If you are, thinking, well, I don't really know what I'm going to do with this degree, or I'm thinking maybe I might want to go into disability, but I don't want to be a special education teacher, but I don't mind working with those with disabilities, the SLP might be an option that you might want to explore. And so basically, once again, self-explanatory, this is the person who is highly trained to work with children with different type of communication disorders, and you're going to be working with that child based off of what's in their IEP or their 504 plan. And like in my son's case, it's about continuing to help him develop ways for him to work on his speech so that hopefully it can continue to improve. And so he has a speech language pathologist at Elite Academy who works with him on, I think he's up to he can do 2-syllable words, but the 3-syllable words can be a little tricky because you think about the word like banana, you think about easy to get out, nana, easy to get out too, but when you want them to go together, sometimes it can be hard to get that quick flip. So banana, it just comes out. But for someone like my son, it's going to come out with a delay like nana, or it might just be nana, or it might be bana. I mean, we know what he means. By that time he's probably gotten up and gotten it anyway. So it's getting better. It's way better than or just nah. So it's getting there. But an SLP would be the person who helps him and other people like him meet those goals in the education setting. And that concludes Chapter 10, Communication Disorders.